The 2010s were a decade of austerity for English councils. Last year, councils spent nearly a quarter less per person on local services than they did in 2009, a cut of £240 per person. And as they have tried to protect some services from the brunt of cuts, like adult social care, other services have seen even bigger cuts. This period of austerity was coming to an end, with increases in funding in both 2019 and 2020. The increase planned for 2020 was expected to be big enough to allow some modest increases in service provision for the first time in a decade. But then the COVID-19 crisis hit. So, how has the crisis affected councils' finances? First, they've been spending more, a lot more. The cost of providing existing services has gone up as councils have had to buy personal protective equipment and rearrange staff rotas, especially in care homes. Councils have also played a major role in responding to the crisis, from delivering food parcels to those who are shielding, to handing out grants to nearly 900,000 businesses and helping with local COVID contact tracing. At the same time, councils have also seen their own incomes fall. For much of the year, far fewer people have been paying to use council car parks or visiting local leisure centres. Some councils, which own commercial property or have stakes in local airports, have been especially badly hit, and as residents have seen their earnings fall or evaporate, more people have become eligible for reductions in their council tax bills. All this means that across England, councils expect to spend £5.4 billion more than they planned to by the end of the financial year in April 2021, and to have lost £2.8 billion in income. Government has stepped in with some additional funding for councils, giving them around £5.3 billion in extra grants, and it's supported them in other ways, such as compensating them for some of these income losses to the tune of £1.8 billion. However, based on the support government has already announced, we estimate this leaves councils with a shortfall of around £1.1 billion this year. On average, that's about 2% of what a council would usually spend in a year, or £14 per person, but some areas will be more badly affected. In a tenth of areas, the shortfall will be more than 5% of council budgets, or £56 per person. While some councils have reserves they may be able to use, this is likely to mean more cuts need to be made to some council services. And these figures don't build in any impacts from the second lockdown, which started in November, which is likely to make the rest of 2020 much tougher than many councils were forecasting. Looking to the future, even with an effective vaccine being rolled out, it seems unlikely that life will be completely back to normal by April 2021, meaning continued pressures on councils. As the second lockdown and rising job losses put extra strain on families, councils can expect rising demand for mental health services and for services that protect vulnerable children. And once support for businesses is eventually scaled back next year, we might expect some on the high street to close for good, meaning less tax revenue too. So, what might we expect for council funding in this spending review? The government has promised to give more details about how it will share some of the financial pressures from this year between local and central government. There might also be an announcement about more funding to help with the immediate pressures, especially in light of the second lockdown. And government could help councils to plan by being clearer about how it will support councils with these ongoing pressures next year. While government might not want to be very specific about numbers, given uncertainty about how the COVID crisis might evolve, it could make clearer how it will make decisions about extra funding over the course of the next year. This will be especially important if, as the government has stated, we return to a system of more localised restrictions. Some big questions are likely to remain. Government had been due to review the relative levels of funding for different councils, as the current formulas used to share funding between them are out of date. Not unreasonably, this review will now not be implemented next April, but the government hasn't confirmed whether the review is just delayed or will be shelved altogether. It should provide more clarity on its intentions, and if the COVID crisis reshapes the economy and leaves some areas particularly badly hit, this should be built into future assessments of funding needs. Looking even further ahead, an ageing population means pressures on adult social care services will continue to rise, eating up more and more of councils' budgets. This pressure may not be sustainable in the long term, forcing government to think about what role councils should play in major policy areas and whether a different funding system is needed to recognise the split between local and national responsibilities. Visit the IFS website to read more of our work.